Good morning, everyone.
Hello, Meg. It's Morgan.
So glad to be here and speak with you guys about something that is really close to my heart, the future of conversational automation. Uh, just for introduction, I'm Anubhav. I lead the research for customer experience management at Everest Group. Everest Group is a leading research and advisory firm helping enterprises as well as tech vendors oversee some of their sourcing decisions when it comes to business process services, IT services, engineering services, and so on. So just as we were wrapping our heads around generative AI, I think they've come up with a new term, right? Agentic AI. I think it's going to be a really interesting and very, I would say, a topical discussion, because agentic AI is something that I believe is really going to be the next game changer as it comes to conversational automation. So I first wanted to start with laying out a report card for what generative AI has done. It's been 2 years since generative AI came to the forefront. And so I wanted to sort of start with what has generative AI already achieved. So we ran a survey surveying more than 150 large enterprises, Fortune 500 companies across industries, across geographies. And I wanted to give you 4 main insights, right? Firstly, generative AI is now, there's a growing prevalence of senior leadership, C-suite leaders who are getting into the deployment, which is a stark change from how it was earlier, right? Generally, most of these decisions used to be within, let's say, a contact center operations head or a particular business function head. But now it's the CEOs, the CTOs, and the CIOs who are directly getting involved. And that's because of the fact that generative AI is not just something that is being deployed in isolation. If you see, most of the operations or most of the deployments generally start with contact center operations. That's where we've seen there are most organizations starting as a test bed for generative AI. But then it's not just that. It's a lot of other customer-facing functions like marketing, sales, trust and safety, as well as back office operations as well. In terms of channels, I think what started generative AI was more around the digital channels, such as text, social media, and chat. But we are now also seeing the voice channel, and especially with increase in or developments in speech-to-text engines, in sound engineering, the voice channel is going to pick up in the deployment. And then the last one, I think that's the most important one, because it will lay the foundation to why agentic AI is really needed. If you look at the level of contact complexity that generative AI can fully automate, none of the enterprises said that generative AI can handle high complex situations at this point of time. Most of them are looking at generative AI only to manage low complexity interactions. And we'll talk about why there is this lack of confidence for enterprises to handle high complexity interactions. So if that reflects to the enterprise approach, if you look at how enterprises are going about it, most of them are looking at it in a cautious way. They're looking to do it in steps and seeing what's working and what's not working, and then figuring out their next steps. And there's a lot of anticipation as well. A lot of them are looking at generative AI as a strategic enabler to move ahead of the competition. And only about 9% are still sort of, figuring out what their way should be around generative AI. So, as I said, right, there's a lot of expectations with generative AI. 75% enterprises are looking at generative AI to have a very high impact. But what's important here is really the timeline, right? If you look at it, most of the enterprises are looking at that 6 to 12-month mark. If I compare this with other technologies in the past, generally enterprises have had a 2 to 3 year time frame to actually realize value from their investments. But with generative AI, people want their money faster. And then if you look at some of the actual and planned investments, right? Back in 2023, when it was a new technology, not a lot of enterprises were really looking to invest money into it, not substantially at least. Then when you look at the chart for 2024 and 2025, every year, the amount of money that is going into generative AI and AI technologies in general, right, is increasing multifold. So it shows that there's a lot of anticipation, there's a lot of excitement around generative AI, and there's real dollars being flown into this technology. For 2025, we are looking at most of the enterprises spending more than $1 million. So that shows the level of investment that's flowing in across industries into generative AI. But having said that, I think it's important to realize that there are certain limitations for all the good things that generative AI does, and for all the good things that it promises. There are limitations with generative AI, and it's important to address what those limitations are, because that sort of sets the foundation for agentic AI. So first things first, right? Generative AI is a passive technology. It depends on the input that the user submits, and then it generates an answer. So because of this, what it often lacks is adapting in real time and changing its response based on changing data, right? When it comes to, let's say, real-time data monitoring, that's where this passive response mechanism can often suffer. The second one is the limited or lack of episodic memory, right? Generative AI works on a session-by-session basis. So because of that, what happens is it does not retain context from previous conversations unless it is prompted that information, unless it is provided that information. And again, if you look at settings like customer contact or customer support, where you need interactions from the past in order to guide the customer in the right way, that's again an area where generative AI suffers. And the third one, which I think is the most important one, is that it does not have reasoning capabilities. How often have we, asked an LLM chatbot a question, and the answers that we've got feels a little on a surface level, lacking a lot of insight? That happens because generative AI does not actually understand what it is churning out, right? It does not really understand, does not have a reasoning engine, because it depends on language patterns rather than logical structures. So it cannot really infer or deduce like a human being can. And that is why when it comes to decisions, or when it comes to scenarios which require a lot of decision making and human judgment, it really suffers. And then the last one, which I think I spoke about in one of the earlier slides, that enterprises are not really looking at generative AI at this point of time to scale for complex scenarios. Let's just assume the situation where you give a prompt, a multi-step prompt to a chatbot. Most of the times, a LLM-powered chatbot does not even understand what a multi-step prompt is, let alone execute workflows from that multi-step prompt. So generally what happens is generative AI sort of suffers from that input-output paradigm of traditional applications, and it gets confused when it's presented with a scenario where it needs to deconstruct that problem and create subtasks so as to solve that problem. So that sort of sets the foundation for this new technology, Agentic AI. And I wanted to first tell you what are the main components of this agentic framework. The three main components that power its intelligence and autonomy are planning, tools, and memory. So planning is really sort of, think of the brain of this agent, right? It uses a lot of different techniques like reflection, like chain of thought, like decompose. So essentially what it does is, till now, a generative AI chatbot used to be like a quick fire answering machine, right? You ask it a question and it just gives you the answer straight away without really even thinking about what was the question really, what was the intent of the user, what should I do? Chain of thought, for example, is a prompting technique which actually helps in giving out the intermediate reasoning steps, right? It helps in explaining, okay, this is what I thought and this is how I came to an answer. So that is really important in giving that sort of transparency and also explaining how the model actually came to an answer. Similarly, decompose, right? When you've encountered a complex scenario, right? How do you decompose that scenario or decompose that task into smaller, more manageable tasks? These are all techniques that Agentic AI brings through its planning component. And then the tools. So that imagine the tools as if the planning section was the brain, think of the tools as the limbs, the hands and the arms of the agent. So it's not just about thinking, right? It's also about getting the work done. And getting the work done, whether it is lifting something or running or walking around, the tools are the ones that actually gets that work done. And so what Agentic AI comes with is a very versatile toolkit, depending on the task, depending on the various subtasks on which the larger task is deconstructed to. It could involve things like RAG, which is essentially sort of complementing the agent's answers through an external knowledge base. It could be a search tools, it could be APIs, it could be a code interpreter, it could be mathematical calculations. So depending on the particular use case, right, depending on how the action needs to be taken, Agentic AI has that versatile toolkit at its disposal. And thirdly, again, very important is the memory component, not just short-term memory, but even long-term memory. This is what helps the Agentic AI to actually remember stuff from its past interactions, from its task history, and using that iteratively improve with time. Okay, I know this is a busy slide, but let me explain this a bit. So everything that I spoke about in the last slide is actually just the components of one agent, right? But the real power of Agentic AI is not just with one agent. It's about working in a multi-agent system. And we're going to be hearing a lot about it today. So it's the inter-execution layer, which is what's going on within the mind and within the workings of one agent. But that's not really it, right? There's the interaction layer, which is where the agent works with other agents, where it works with its shared memory and with its environment. So let me just quickly run this through, right? Whenever there is any sort of prompt, it could be a multimodal input. It converts the perception layer of the agent, converts it into vector embeddings, which are essentially things that the LLM can understand, right? The LLM then converts that complex task into various different subtasks using things like chain of thought, using things like decompose. It breaks it down into different subtasks, and then it commissions various different multiple models. It could be language models, it could be vision models, it could be task-based models to actually do these tasks. And then what's important really is that it is not just one agent working in isolation. It's working with other AI agents. It's working with a shared memory. I talked about the long-term memory, right? So it actually goes back to its short-term memory and to its long-term memory and understands, how to improve with time. It actually interacts with its environment to get different kinds of data sources in real time and make its decision in the right way or in the right manner possible. So if we look at the adoption potential of Agentic AI, and by the way, this is just a illustrative list, not a complete list. But if you look at the potential of Agentic AI across business functions, both verticals and horizontals, what we see is the number one from a business function perspective, the application of Agentic AI is for internal support. So think of any sort of HR bot or IT bot or these sort of processes. That's where we believe that Agentic AI has the highest potential at this point of time, followed by customer support. And that's purely because of the sheer volumes and the kind of processes that are involved with customer support. And then other things like software development, sales and marketing, legal, supply chain, and so on. And when it comes to the verticals, I think this sort of reflects investments in conversational AI and generative AI, which are, I would say, the baseline layer for an Agentic AI system to work, right? The verticals such as financial services, telecom, retail, these have been generally the front runners when it comes to using generative AI and conversational AI. So they've sort of set that baseline layer for them to upgrade them to an agentic system. That is why we believe that financial services, telecom, retail, healthcare, all of them are going to be the front runners. But I do believe that in 24 to 36 months, in 2 to 3 years' time, all of them will be using, all the industries, whether it is, let's say, a healthcare or let's say government, everyone is going to be using Agentic AI in some shape or form. Right. So now I wanted to there's a lot of theory. I wanted to explain how an agentic workflow would actually look like in a real life scenario. We talked about how financial services or insurance is one of the biggest, has the highest adoption potential, right? So here I have a scenario of an insurer using an agentic workflow for its claims management process. So imagine that there is a vehicle collision that has happened, right? The first thing that happens is the cameras or the images, the sensors capture the images of the event and it shares that data with the insurer. At the same point of time, the claimant makes a claim. It sends all the data, which includes police reports, the claims document, the images of the damage, which is then fed to the IDP, the Intelligent Document Processing tool, which checks the information, extracts it, and sends it to this intake agent. Now, this intake agent is really sort of think of it as the master agent, which gets all this different information from various different sources. It understands this complex task, right? You can imagine it's a really complex task because there are a lot of different images, there are a lot of different types of data sources, right? From text to images to maybe even voice recordings. All of that, it comes to this intake agent, which is sort of the master agent, which then divides this complex task into subtasks which are more manageable. It sequences them, it prioritizes them, and as you can see, right, it divides it into 4 different subtasks, which are then done one by one, right after the other. So starting with first the vision agent. The vision agent is one which looks at the different images. It probably uses a large multimodal or a vision model to create a visual inspection report. That visual inspection report then becomes the input for the cost assessment agent. The cost assessment agent probably uses a maths model. What it also does is it goes back to its history, goes back to its long-term memory, and it actually looks at previous such estimations to help in calculating what is the cost estimation report. If the scenario is too complex and it is difficult for it to calculate it, it could probably even go back to a human assessor. And then what it does is it creates this cost estimation and sends it to the next agent, which is the negotiation agent. The negotiation agent looks at the cost estimation, looks at, let's say, the claimant's preferences for what kind of a negotiation amount would be right for it. It looks at different repair agencies, coordinates through all of that, and then creates a final settlement report or a settlement amount. What it also does is perhaps it goes through the weather APIs, it checks what was the weather during that time, during the incident, looks at all of different information. It could also look at the claimant's driving history. Has that person had a history of bad driving? So it looks at all different data sources to then finally create that settlement report, which is then transferred to the approval of the payout agent. The approval of the payout agent, firstly, what it does is it looks at all the other actions that have been done in the past, and it sees if all of that has been done following companies' regulations and the different standards, and it sort of approves all of that. And after doing all of that, through its payment API, it does the payment, it triggers the notification to the claimant, to the repair agencies, and with that, the entire task is completed in the back end. And in the front end, the intake agent continues to be the interface for the claimant. If it's a simple claim, it is a completely autonomous decision. The decision is completely done without any sort of human intervention. And if it's a complex claim, then as I said, it could use a human in the loop. It could help that in that decision making. And finally, hopefully in a week's time, the vehicle gets back on the road. So the 3 things that I would want to call out here that I probably alluded while I was speaking was, firstly, this is a system where multiple agents are working together. Each of them know their roles. Each of them know how to work with each other. And that happens through effective AI orchestration. Probably something that we'll hear from the Druid conductor as well. The second thing is the ability of the agents to access its long-term memory. The ability of the agent to access, let's say, the claimant's preferences for a negotiation, or the ability of the agent to look at the driving history of the particular the claimant. And then the third thing is the ability to access the outside environment as well, right? So things like what was the weather during that time, what was the the claimant's driving history, those sort of things which are outside the environment where the AI agent actually operates. So using these 3 things, using the fact that there are multiple agents that are working together in tandem, the fact that it can access its memory, the fact that it can access its memory as well as access the environment where it is able to actually completely automate this incident reporting workflow and do the claims. Right. So this is my last slide. So while all of this, if we sort of have to synthesize all of this together for business leaders such as yourselves, I believe that we're going to be shifting to a world where we move from there's an app for that to there's an agent for that. The implications are very clear for business leaders that this is something that's going to be happening in the next, very soon, in the next few months. So what are the imperatives for Agentic AI adoption? We've divided it into 5 different dimensions. firstly, the strategy part, right? I think it's very important for every business leader to look at their agentic AI roadmap by considering their own business areas, their own objectives, and their own pain points, and devise their strategy based on that. There's a very important need for balance between control and flexibility. You don't want to give too much control to the agents, but at the same point of time, you also want to have flexibility. So balancing that would be extremely important, as is effective change management for any sort of new technology. It is very important for change management techniques to help employees understand the value of this technology. The next one is talent. I think such a technology would definitely cause disruptions in the way that humans work. It's sort of like a much smarter employee that is working along with you. That will lead to redesign of job architectures, workflows, and performance metrics as well. And then from a tech talent perspective as well, it's going to be very important to find and train the right sort of tech talent that will help in building these systems, maintaining these systems throughout. From the process perspective, I think codification of business processes is also going to be very important to standardize the use of agentic AI across the organization, and the monitoring of AI agent performance as well. As we sort of scale up, it's important to see to set the right sort of parameters for the improvement or for the assessment of the AI agents. Then the technology and the data, I've clubbed them together for obvious reasons that, this is the most important aspect. I believe that quality data is the backbone for any sort of AI system to work, right? Because any AI agent will use disparate data sources and disparate data types as well. It's going to be very important to have scalable data lakes for real-time processing, which is very important for agentic AI to work. And secondly is the AI orchestration platform. As we saw, right, there are different AI models. Could be a large language model, could be a vision model, could be a task-oriented model, could be a maths model, all of them working together. And that's where AI orchestration is going to be really important to ensure that there is effective utilization of all the different models, all of them working together for a common objective. And then last but not the least is the risk factor. Obviously, if you have agents that are working and automating entire workflows together, the topic of AI governance becomes even more important. To have an enterprise-wide governance framework, which sort of sets guardrails on what is the right sort of control that you would want to give to AI agents. And of course, human-in-the-loop control mechanisms is still going to be important. As much as you operate or you automate that workflow, there will still be humans required for handling edge cases and so on and so forth. And last but not the least, I just wanted to leave you guys with one very important, I would say, thought-provoking comment. According to us, this is a prediction that by the mid-2026, which is about 18 months from now, 1/4 of all interactions that will leverage generative AI services will involve autonomous agents. So that's just 18 months from now. The investments in this space is coming thick and fast. Every single day, if you search about agentic AI, you will probably see a Mistral or an OpenAI coming up with new topics, coming up with new innovations, as well as technology leaders such as Druid and others coming up with these new technologies. So, this is something that is definitely going to be all the rage in the next 12 to 24 months. And future-focused leaders such as yourself should definitely not be waiting on the sideline for this sort of a technology. Thank you.
Great.
Before he leaves the stage, any questions? Great session.
Yep.
Questions, anyone? Oh, yes.
I had a question about mics. When you showed the multi-agent flow.
Yeah.
Oh.
Hi, Rob Sussin from Walmart Conversational Commerce. When you showed the multi-agent flow, you said that the agents know about each other.
Yeah.
Are they autonomous and they don't know what the other agents are doing, and the conductor is the one that knows everything and is kind of putting them together? Or are they aware of one another and...
So for example, let me just go back to this slide, right? So the cost assessment agent, for example, knows what its role is. It knows that it's going to get a visual inspection report, which is going to be the input for it to work. And then it knows that it has to send what is the cost estimation report for the agent that is next to it. right? So think of it as human beings if they are all working together, right?
Yeah, it's a series. You're saying.
And that's where I was talking about this the planning part, right? The brain, or which is the intake agent in the example that I was showing, it actually helps in sequencing and prioritizing the tasks for the agent. So in a way, you can say yes, all these agents, they know, because they've been fed that instruction from the intake agent that this is the order you've got to follow. You can't have, let's say, the cost assessment agent coming after the negotiation agent, right? So you have to know, the agents have to know what each of their tasks are and how to go about it to complete the task autonomously.
But if it's in a series, then something like the vision agent wouldn't know anything about what the negotiation agent has come up with, right?
Yeah. So the revision agent's role is not really hasn't really anything to do with the negotiation part of it, right? The vision agent's role is essentially to gather all these images and create a visual inspection report. Anything else that comes after the vision agent's job is done is not really something that it is concerned about. So,
Thank you very much.
Any other questions? Anyone else? We'll move to the next session. All right. Thank you, Anubhav. It's great.